Carl, what are we doing?
Okay, so this is gonna be very special. This is kind of a hybrid of a little bit of quiz and a lot of Magic history.
I love quizzes and I love Magic history.
Yes, exactly. So this is 5 cards that were changed by rules changes. So we have 5 rule changes here, and I will show you cards and you tell me why those cards changed.
So just to be clear, they didn't change the rules on the card.
No.
They changed the rules of Magic.
Yes.
And then that affected this card.
Exactly.
All right.
Are you ready?
And I have to guess what rule change it is.
Yes. Some of them might be hard because like rule changes are old. In the recent years, we didn't have many rule changes, but back then it was like completely changing the games or cards.
Okay.
All right. Number 5. Are you ready?
Yes.
This
Mog
is Mog
Fanatic, also called the Ragavan Sniper. This is
even played today.
This is damage on the stack, right?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this was the easy starter one to even get a point.
Do you want to explain the interaction if you deal combat damage with Mog Fanatic?
Yes. So how Magic damage happened before in combat, we didn't have deal damage done. We had damage on stack, which means that after you dealt damage, there's actually a time window where you can do stuff with the cards or you as a player with instant. Meaning in this case, when you have Mog Fanatic, you can sacrifice a deal 1 damage, and that means it dealt the damage from its power and also its ability.
So this 1/1 could trade with a 2/2.
Exactly. It was effectively a 2/1. The worst case, which for 1 mana is quite decent, but also you could shoot a different creature. So if it gets blocked by a 1/1, then you can deal 1 damage and shoot a different creature.
And I mean, at the time, a 2/1 for 1 mana came with a downside usually.
Yes, exactly. So I mean, it only attacks for 1, but there are many different like points where creatures got much worse because of damage on stack. They did it so they can print more cards nowadays that wouldn't be as powerful. And yeah, very classic, very iconic. If you have never played with damage on stack, it changes the game completely.
Completely. So it's really hard to wrap your head around as a new player.
Well, imagine you have played this for like years and years, and then all of a sudden you have to get rid of it, right? Yeah. And even nowadays, I still sometimes catch my thoughts, and it's like, damage on stack?
Wait, have you played longer with damage on the stack than...
No,
there's no way.
Damage on stack was like 6th editions or something. Okay. Some years with this and then many years without. All right, this was the freebie.
Oh yeah, that was the easy one. Next one.
Very good. So next card we have, Pulse of the Forge.
I remember looking at this card and thinking it was broken many years ago, and then realizing it's not quite. I actually don't know. I know this is a great way of telling if a player has played a lot or is good or not, because doing the second clause seems so broken until you realize that usually if you're paying 3 mana to deal 4 damage to someone, their life total should be lower than yours. No, you're gonna have to tell me. I don't have a guess for this one.
If yours is lower than theirs, you get it back. So you probably heard of the term, but you couldn't connect it to the card, but it's funny because I see it here. Okay, there was mana burn. So what you could do is you use mana from your lands. If you couldn't use it in your whatever you were, you got dealt 1 damage for each mana you had. So that if you floated a red, you didn't use it, bang, you got a damage. So what people did is that made them manipulate their own life total, because you could burn yourself for a damage each mana.
So are you saying that this card was better at the time because any mana that you wouldn't use, you just float it?
So what frequently happened, for example, if you played against a control deck, you just even started turn 1 burning. Just like this. If you're on like 10, it doesn't matter for your opponent, but you could start casting this and getting it back for free.
I love the flex of the control player. I mean, your turn and you're like, end of turn? I'll take 1.
That happened. Not kidding. Because then eventually you end up like 10 life and you can start casting this and they need to get rid of it. And it becomes really problematic when you're like at 6-5 life, because like, what are you gonna do? You just get burned.
So are you saying that there's actually constructed decks that played this?
No, it's just mono red burn decks, but they started burning themselves when they needed to.
Well, if you want to see the decks, we'll put links in the description to when each of these cards used to be good, what the decks look like at the time.
There's also a very good Cardmarket article basically about this topic from Tobias, which is very good too.
He's the one who's gonna find the deck list for us.
Very good read. So another thing of this thing is it doesn't only work for you, it also kind of works with your opponent, because when you burn, your opponent also had the chance to burn. Let's imagine you're at 8 life.
Yeah.
And I'm at like 6. This card deals 4 damage. And I get it back when I'm, after the 4 damage, have lower life total. So at the end of your turn, I will go down to 3 life.
So if you knew your opponent was gonna cast this again because they just brought it back to their hand, you would start hurting yourself so that they wouldn't get it back?
Exactly, because once I'm at 3 life, and you remain at 8. I shoot you for 4, you go to 4, I get it back, I shoot you for 4, you're dead.
This is a fun sub-game.
So yes, and then people also had to burn, but that means you don't necessarily have to card in your hand, because you could just burn like thinking they had this, and you dealt 3 damage to your opponent. Very, very iconic like mind game.
So if you started burning yourself, they'd be like, oh, they probably have a Pulse of the Forge in their hand, and they start hitting themselves for no reason.
That happened. One of the famous gameplays, was that they burned down to 5 because 5 is a safe number. You can only go to 1, and then they Shraven blasted for 5 damage. And they never had the pulse.
All right, I couldn't guess this one, but thank you for the magic history.
Yes. Number 3, we have Tolarian Academy. This is a card you know. Everybody
knows Tolarian Academy, whether you play competitive, whether you play cube, whether you play commander.
Yes.
This card is very good.
And I give you a hint, or maybe you could figure out, it has something to do with being legendary.
So when you have a legendary permanent at the current time, if you play another legendary permanent, you sacrifice one of them, you decide which one. Did it have to do with...
This is right now, right?
This is currently, at the current moment.
Yes.
I am not sure what the old legend rule used to be. I know that at some point, even if your opponent had the same legendary permanent, one of them had to sacrifice. So I assume that, just for context, at the current moment, if you cast a Tolarian Academy, if you play a Tolarian Academy, and on your next turn, you can tap for 10 mana, and then play another one, sacrifice the one that's tapped, and then tap it again for that same other on the next turn. I assume that before you could just not play permanents that were legendary if you had the other one in play?
So you say like one legendary forbid the next legendary?
Oh wait, is this a wild world where you could have multiple legendaries in play?
Magic was a
wild time, but I assume they wouldn't call things a legend for nothing, and it used to be its own creature type, so I'm going to go ahead and say that you couldn't play things if you had a legendary.
You're absolutely correct. Outstanding. Very good, yes. The Magic legendary rule changed a lot of times. There's actually a short about it, about unnatural selection, shifting some creature types. If you haven't watched it, watch all the shorts.
Pushing your own shorts? Yeah, watch all the shorts.
They're great. So the first legendary thing was, when somebody played legendary, it was forbidden for everybody else, also yourself, to play it. Right? It was just the permanent. You cannot cast it or play it or whatever. If you get rid of it, it was all free for all again. The way this worked, because artifact decks were very strong back then, if your opponent played the Academy first, you couldn't play it. So literally every deck played an Academy, even though they didn't use it.
Mono green, aggressive,
aggro, first turn Academy, knocked out your opponent. You
can't cast anything
Mono
with it?
aggro, Academy.
Win.
Yes, they just played Academy for the reason that your opponent couldn't play.
Yeah, I love that.
That made them change it, that when you play a second legendary, you could play it, but then all of them get destroyed. I play my Academy, then you have to play your Academy, then both get destroyed and you could play your next one again. So the additional copies at least did something. Yeah, but back then, it actually was not to be allowed to play, and the legendary was a messed up thing. This is gonna be fun. This is the good one.
The good one? Why didn't you save it for last?
No, this is a very good one. This is
okay.
So this card is Mirror Universe, and you gotta probably have to read that also at home. It's an old card.
The art is also a little outdated, let's say. Yeah. Sacrifice Mirror Universe, exchange life totals with target opponent, play this ability only during your upkeep. Now this is 6 mana. In Ixalan, they printed a white spell that is 6 mana, just exchange life totals. You don't have to wait till your upkeep.
The Ixalan enchantment is kind of too new to be effective, but back then this was actually majorly impacted.
So are you telling me this was a good card before this rule change?
I'm not gonna tell you anything. I will give you a hint.
All right.
A little bit of hint, right? Something you've learned in this video up until now helps you.
I was gonna think it had to do with mana burn.
Very good, very good.
Oh yeah, okay, so you can float a bunch of mana, hurt yourself a bunch, just slap yourself in the face for a few turns, and then swipe life totals with your... Could you on the stack? No, you couldn't on the stack burn yourself and then give them 0 life, right? That's flying too close to the sun. I'm gonna assume that this was changed by mana burn, because you could hurt yourself a bunch.
To be fair, you got so close to it, I will give it to you.
Oh, thank you.
The rules change that happened here, that is 6th edition, is when you entered the territory of 0 life, you didn't die. You only died at the end of the phase.
Were you dead on the stack? Like
there was no stack, but the game remembered, okay, you're at 0, you're dying soon, right?
And then it would check at the end of the phase.
Yes. So you basically only died if the end of the phase you had 0 life.
So could you give yourself 0 on the stack? Oh, okay, so yeah, you would burn yourself down to 0, but you're not dead yet. It's gonna check later, it's gonna knock on the door, and before that you'd switch life totals with your opponent.
And now you have
when
0
it checks, it's like, oh, you're fine.
Yeah,
you're not
fine.
at 0.
Wait, no, but you're not
False
fine.
alert.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually very, very powerful. Very powerful. Obviously, if you played this mana, the artifact, you just needed to get in your upkeep to a point where you burn yourself to 0, and then you just switch.
This is very annoying.
Yeah,
there's also a frustrating way to die.
I mean, it just literally knocks on your door. And actually, back then, lifelink also saved you from dying. Like, lifelink went over the stat.
Yeah.
But you could die in combat, but then lifelink got you over dying.
Yeah, I remember.
Also, you could like do some life gain spells after you actually dying, and then it was messed up. Now they got rid of it and said, if you're 0, you're dead.
Confusing times.
Yeah.
Let's get to the really
Great
good
stuff.
one.
All right. This is a card, I mean, every Commander player basically knows. A lot of people hate it, but it's it's Winter Oath.
Oh yeah, back when Magic used to be real fun. This is cheating because I think I know this one already. This is a time where artifacts only were affected when they tapped, right?
Why do you know so much? Yes, as walls back then had Defender written on them.
Without having Defender written on them?
It just said wall and you had to know they can't attack. Artifacts didn't work when they're tapped. Nowadays, actually, they reprinted those cards with the text on it, unless it's untapped. But you had some things that taps permanent. So what you usually would do, like for example, now we have Urza, right? The way you tap for mana.
Yeah.
So end of turn you go tap it, and then in your upkeep, oh wait, this is tapped. I untap everything. Oh, it's untapped again. You don't untap anything. Yeah, that was actually the way you did it. So there were many different interactions that just made the way of untapping this.
I mean, this card in its own is still a pretty good card in aggro decks, right?
Yes.
Against your opponent, they tap out 5 mana for like a big drop, and you're like, you slap this down, and then you keep on attacking, and they can't do anything for a few turns.
But as soon as this is one-sided, it gets outstandingly ridiculous.
It gets absurd.
There's another card that works like this, which is Holy Mind, where you draw an additional card in your upkeep that also doesn't work.
Did people used to tap Howling Mind during their opponent's turn?
Constantly, yes. And then you only drew a card. Also, Holy Mind has the phrase now, if it's untapped. Because those 2 cards were the major cards you used to tap, so your opponent doesn't.
Oh, is that why you asked me not to bring a reprint?
Yes, because on the new card it would say like if it's untapped.
I see.
Yeah, so you get like the old nostalgic thing. I mean, you can see how Magic changed. We almost have 30 years now.
Yeah,
basically.
And you can see how this game was developed at the beginning, not knowing how popular it would be.
Yes.
This one guy just getting his friends to come up with sets. Like clearly, there's some mistakes that can be made, and they had to correct for some of it eventually. Once you've got a hive mind of thousands and thousands and thousands of players trying to figure out ways to break the game.
Yes. Yeah. So if you have some famous cards and rules changes that were affected and make cards playable or literally unplayable.
Yeah, leave it in the comments. Also, if you do want to know more, if you're like, this was fun, I want to see this again, like, subscribe, click that subscribe button especially. That's how we kind of measure the success of videos, and it really does help our bosses measure the success of us. But comment if you want to see this again. Toralf is full of a wealth of Magic facts.
An encyclopedia. God, that was
Did you try to say encyclopedia?
Can we cut that out?
Toralf is an encyclopedia of Magic knowledge.
Oh, that was the worst.
So thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.